listen-only mode.
Welcome. Telstra, in alliance with Accenture, is proud to sponsor today's webinar. Our alliance will assist Australian organisations make a smooth transition to cloud computing, minimising risk and with maximum flexibility. Together, we will bring you the best of Accenture's proven methodologies and deep experience in IT optimisation, plus Telstra's connected cloud offering. With leading-edge ICT delivered across Australia's secure and far-reaching networks, your organisation can now match technology precisely to your business needs and only pay for what you use. For more information, visit telstra.com/cloud.
Welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Introduction to Cloud Computing, sponsored by Telstra Enterprise and Government. My name is Paul Dorber and I'll be your moderator today. Now while we're waiting for the last people to file in, I'll run through some quick housekeeping. Now first, to keep note of talking to a minimum and the interaction to a maximum. We'll be providing you with a link tomorrow to the recording of this live session. Speaking of interaction, please take the opportunity throughout the webinar to write the panelists a question by using the control panel on the right-hand side. As always, we'll do our best to answer all the questions you ask, but it may not be possible to respond to each and every one. So apologies up front for that. Now, okay, let's get started. We've had a slight change. One of our panelists today, unfortunately, Kevin Noonan from Ovum, is ill. And so kindly filling in for him is Dr. Steve Hodgkinson, Research Director of the Public Sector, Australia and New Zealand at Ovum, and Phil Goldie, Director, Server and Tools Business Group, Australia at Microsoft. And welcome to you both.
Hi.
Thanks, Paul.
We will just go to Steve first, who has a bit of a presentation to give you an introduction to the topic. Steve.
Thanks very much, Paul. Kevin Noonan has laryngitis, so even though he has an excellent face for radio, he's no good without a voice. So what I have here is a few presentation slides which just step through some basic concepts around cloud computing. The first one, slide number 2, is putting forward the idea that cloud computing is an evolution of shared services discussions that have been around in large organizations for a long time. So whatever scope of in-house IT operations you currently have, most organizations are thinking about ways that they can access IT with more economies of scale by getting bigger operations and by sharing things that are...
just one moment, Steve. Sorry to interrupt you there. You're slipping a little bit in and out with the volume, so if you wouldn't mind speaking straight into the mic, yeah, that would help a lot. Thank you.
Okay. So the whole idea of cloud computing as an evolution of previous organizational strategies for shared scale is a key notion here. Previously, we've thought of this in terms of outsourcing arrangements, which are kind of hardwired ways of accessing the scale of an outsourcer, or as internal shared services strategies where organizations are blobbing together bits and pieces of IT functions into single shared service organizations. These are both kind of internal ways of doing it, partnering in dedicated ways. Cloud computing is the ultimate expression of this game. Global scale, maximum sharing, standardized utility style computing. And we're seeing two basic variants of it: public cloud computing and private cloud computing, which is ways of trying to bring cloud computing to enterprises in a more secure kind of a way. Now we'll talk on the next slide about what cloud computing is and who are the main players, if we can go to the next slide. And what we see is there are three main variants of cloud computing: the notion of software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. The software as a service is this idea of buying an application over the internet without having to have anything other than a computer to run a web browser within your organization. The poster children of that are companies like NetSuite and Salesforce, and many smaller players, Zoho and Desktop, and there are hundreds and hundreds of companies in this space now. Platform as a service is the notion of being able to develop a new application on an internet platform, Google Apps, Microsoft Azure, Salesforce Developer Force. These are platforms that enable organizations to create new applications and then run them on the internet in the cloud. Infrastructure as a service is the idea of being able to access compute capacity or storage on the cloud. Amazon Web Services is a company that most people think of when they think of infrastructure as a service.
Excuse me, Steve, just once again.
Yep.
The volume, the sound is still playing up a little bit. Could you please try holding the mic straight to your mouth and see if that improves it?
Yeah, I've got it.
Thank you.
Got it straight there. So the whole idea of these three things, these are public cloud computing services. They're available on the internet from organizations that operate effectively targeting the whole globe as their market. The bottom row are companies that are the companies we traditionally look at as the enterprise IT players, the IBMs, the Oracles, the Telstra as a telecommunications company, Fujitsu, Unisys. These companies are now bringing cloud computing to the market in a way that's more suited for large-scale enterprises. But it's interesting that the public cloud computing players, the Salesforces, the Amazons of the world, have created a new style of computing which the major IT companies are now bringing to market in an enterprise-grade way. That style of computing is elastic, it's on demand, it's over the internet, pay as you go, and it's a new. Go to the next slide. This is very much.
Sorry, Steve. Yeah, maybe you could
good.
Use the telephone. I think the microphone you're using is not working. So, if you're able to switch to the telephone.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, can you?
Yeah, click on the telephone on the audio mode on the right side of the screen, and it says use telephone. If you go down there, that should help. Let's just see if we can fix up the sound problem we're having there. We'll just swap from the mic to telephone. Are you there, Phil?
Yes, I'm here, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe tell us a little bit what you on the subject while we're waiting to be reconnected on the other front.
Yeah, sure. No, look, I think Steve's given a good overview of a couple of things. Firstly, the transformation that I think we typically in the IT industry see every 10 years or so. That a kind of a radical shift in computing, be it from mainframe to mini computer to the introduction of the PC, the arrival of the internet. If you think of that, those sort of 10-year chunks, this concept of cloud, comes almost sort of at another 10-year juncture, and it is really, we're seeing transforming the way a lot of companies are now thinking about consuming technology and moving from, a much more capex-based purchase and operate mode through to a much more of a consumption OpEx style of purchasing. So, that's definitely a trend that we're seeing from a lot of customers. And then, these notions of buying different types of cloud service, whether it's infrastructure, as Steve talked to, from hosting providers, the like of which you can see some of those at the bottom of that slide, or software, as you can see at the top, with a number of hundreds and hundreds of companies now effectively providing finished software applications from cloud. And then probably more interestingly is this kind of platform concept in the middle, where a number of vendors, including Microsoft, are starting to build out a platform capability that developers and software vendors can target and use to bring cloud services to market. So we very much see the same sort of trends in terms of that 10-year leap forward that happens in the industry, bringing cloud now very aggressively to reality, as well as these sort of layers of different types of capability. So a good framework to think through, I guess, in terms of considering, firstly, that cloud isn't the answer to every question by any means, and secondly, that there are three distinct types of cloud service that you might want to consider.
Yep, thanks for that. And while we've got this little break there, Colin has sent in a question, and hopefully you can answer this one. Is cloud computing really viable for a small business under 10 staff?
That's a great question, and actually the answer is a resounding yes. And again, it depends a little bit on the kind of the lens that you put across it. So, if you think about one of the most popular workloads or applications that people are using from the cloud today, that's email. And if you think about the rise of consumer email services like Microsoft Hotmail, like Google Gmail, and a number of others, those could be very easily considered cloud-based services. They're delivered on demand, completely user-provisioned, completely elastic. You don't spend any time worrying about whether Hotmail has got enough server capacity to store your emails. It's just always available. And we're seeing a lot of small businesses now adopt those email services, or for example, our commercial email services like Microsoft Online services, where we offer online versions of a number of our traditional software products. And small businesses there are really taking advantage of those. And the reason is twofold. One, you no longer have to worry there about running an email server and running email infrastructure, for example, inside of your office. So to Colin's question, if you're a company of, say, less than 10 people, you really don't want to have to employ or have a pseudo IT manager within that team. If you're a team of, a small team of consultants or architects or accountants, for example, you want to focus on your core business. So buying email or buying other types of software like CRM and other types of applications from the cloud makes sense in terms of removing the overhead of buying IT equipment to do that, plus also the overhead of thinking about it and managing it. So definitely there. The second thing is that we're seeing small businesses being able to take advantage of new capability that they wouldn't have used previously. So one of the trends that we've seen with a lot of our small business customers is, aside from just using email, they're also using our entire productivity suite. So if you think about traditional Microsoft platforms like Exchange for email, SharePoint for collaboration, Office Communications Server for instant messaging and voice and video conferencing, typically, that would have been a portfolio of products that was somewhat out of the reach of the typical small business, just due to, again, cost and relative complexity for a small business. Now you can buy those services directly through a cloud platform. They make a huge amount of sense. Now you can effectively subscribe to those services for a few dollars per user per month. So those are the two things we're seeing are really triggering small businesses to aggressively adopt a lot of cloud services. I think, to sort of elaborate just one step further, what we are seeing, though, is that at that segment of the market, what customers are really interested in buying is software as a service rather than platform as a service or infrastructure as a service. So, there are some great success stories both with Microsoft and other companies like Salesforce, for example, where we've seen a really significant adoption, and a lot of that is driven from small business.
Well, thanks for that answer, Phil. Now, Steve, are you there now?
Yeah, no, look, I'm still just on my laptop. That access code doesn't work on the phone.
Oh, okay, but you sound better now anyway. Would you like to pick up from the slide we're on now?
Which one are we on? Slide 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure what Phil was covering off while I was fluffing around there. This is one of the...
No, Phil just answered a question. Yeah, you must have missed that. Colin asked if cloud computing was really viable for a small business under 10 staff, and Phil's response was, yes, definitely.
Yes, exactly. The ideal kind of scenario in many ways for people using the cloud, because they're looking to access computing resources in a way when they don't necessarily have the internal capability to do it themselves. So if we go to the next slide, which is slide 7.
There it is.
Then this paints a bit of a mud map of the Australian market. At the moment, we regard it from an enterprise perspective as something of a nascent kind of a landscape, in the sense that it's only really this year that that major vendors are bringing enterprise-grade cloud computing offerings into the Australian market. So there are cloud computing offerings available internationally, based in the US or Europe or in Singapore or Asia. But within Australia, it's only really this year that vendors have started to put onshore facilities And in some ways you shouldn't care about that because the cloud is the cloud, it's the internet. But many companies are worried about the idea that data would be offshore in other jurisdictional control, other legislation. So they want cloud computing from Australian-based organisations. So in this perspective, companies like CSC, Fujitsu, Macquarie Telecom, Melbourne IT, NEC, Telstra, Optus are now in the process or have launched infrastructure as a service offerings in this market this year. And other vendors like IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, Verizon are coming soon with their international offerings into this market. Other big companies that we normally see in the IT space, CA, HP, IBM, Cisco, EMC, VMware, Unisys, etc., are all in the space providing tools and frameworks into this cloud landscape. If we look at points of adoption for software as a service over the next page, then it's a much richer landscape where we see a large number of corporates, universities, and small businesses adopting cloud services for the more commodity-like services, email, office computing, and selected applications. And there are now a large number of proof points now for fairly large-scale implementation of, for example, email in the cloud, which shows that it's possible to trust the cloud for what is a mission-critical kind of application and source it from the cloud rather than run it out of your in-house IT organization. So the next slide, slide 6, talks about slide 9 in your presentation, talks about the logic of what's going on here. And an important thing to think about is the idea that cloud computing is a radical simplification of the logic of buying IT. So what we're seeing is this whole idea that a service is transparently available on the internet or through the cloud computing provider. It's easy to see what it is, to try it and buy it. It provisions automatically. The catalogue of services is explicit. The pricing is explicit. And historical performance can be assessed. The APIs are explicit. You know how to get data into it and data out of it and to integrate it with your other applications. And it's elastic in the sense that you can just start to use it and it will absorb your workload as part of the service. And it's all because the back end is radically re-engineered using virtualization and automation. And we see some big enterprise adoption of this. For example, Sony Pictures and Entertainment with Workday, which is a HR application. And the cost savings and time savings are significant. So Workday found that half the time and a third of the cost to implement their corporate global HR application with Workday compared to other more proprietary in-house SAP and Oracle systems that they were evaluating. Salesforce, for example, has now 82,000 customers worldwide, and the average implementation time is 40 days for what for many organizations is a major application. So the whole idea is it's a radical simplification. The standardized service, it's available more quickly and more cheaply because of the fact that it's available on demand over the internet. If we go to slide 10, then what we need here, though, is a bit of new thinking. We can think of metaphorically in-house IT as a bit like a Range Rover or insert luxury vehicle of your choice. So it's a highly engineered, robust machine that you as an organization can take anywhere that you need to go. And most organizations value the idea that their in-house IT is fit for any journey that they want to take. With cloud computing, we can think of some different metaphors, like public transport for infrastructure as a service. Turn up at the train station, buy as much transport as you need for as many people as you want for as long as you need, or use it on a regular basis, but it's a different thing compared to the Range Rover. It's a shared service. We can use the smart car analogy to think of things like Salesforce as a smarter, more nimble, quicker, less costly way of doing enterprise IT. It's a proper vehicle in that sense, but it's smarter and lower cost. Or even a bicycle. And Google Maps is an example of bicycle computing in that sense. Previously, to present things on a website, we would have had to buy software, buy a server, install it, test it, run it, etc. Now we consume the web service of Google Maps to present things on websites at virtually no cost or even for free. It's an example of a radical change in approach. And what this is all about is new options for thinking about how you get IT to meet a business need. But it requires a bit of a change of mindset, because most of us, metaphorically, would rather drive in our own Range Rover rather than take public transport. Maybe there's not the cash for the expanding fleet of Range Rovers. Maybe for some journeys the cloud is actually better. If we go to the next slide, 11, then a key thing to think about with cloud computing is this idea, which I use the phrase, cloudy is as cloudy does. Much of what business people think about traditional IT is a bit like this used car salesman metaphor. She's going to go like a wee beauty, just trust me. Give me the money up front. We'll buy the technology, we'll do the organizational change, and down the track in 18 months, in 2 years' time, or whatever, the system will work, just trust me. And there's so much disappointment with that, typically because the applications run over time, over budget, don't do what they want. Cloud computing is the opposite of that. It's all about this idea that a service already exists, it's already running at scale, it's quality certified, it is what it says on the label. All you need to do is decide to become a customer of it. And it's available more or less immediately. I mean, in some cases, literally right away, but in a very short space of time. There's no question that it will do what you want it to do, and you can assure yourself of that up front. Slide 12. And as I mentioned at the start, it's this kind of nascent market. Buyers and sellers are both growing up in this cloud discussion. Chicken Little often comes into the conversation with a whole lot of reasons why cloud computing is not for you. The vendors are not enterprise grade, the data is outside of Australia or outside of a particular jurisdiction. How do you manage your reliance on it with service level agreements and contracts, etc., etc. There's a lot of reasons people raise why cloud computing is not for them. But as both buyers and the vendors of cloud are maturing, we see that most of these issues are simply design and implementation considerations. As a general statement, there's no particular reason why cloud computing shouldn't be appropriate for organizations for particular types of workload, for particular applications and particular circumstances. And once organizations get a feel for cloud computing, they become more confident with the way it is. The final slide, slide 13, is our advice to CIOs in terms of thinking about the cloud, or IT managers, or even business executives. The first is heads up. This is a big change in the IT industry, and we should be looking at it carefully and seeing how they might be useful to your agency in the public sector or to your business. Take stock. Most large organizations find that cloud services are already being used in their organization. So they're surprised that cloud has come in beyond the IT organization. See for yourself. There's never been a technology like this that's easier to evaluate and to test and play with. Get cloud ready. Any new application should be engineered for the cloud in terms of its architecture. Standards are critical. And for Australia particularly, there are big industry policy angles around this. Cloud offshores IT jobs virtually invisibly, and there's never been a more powerful way to offshore jobs from Australia using technologies like cloud computing. So therefore it's critical that we develop within Australia an awareness of the opportunities of cloud computing in order that we can become an exporter of cloud services as opposed to a net importer. So there are big industry policy angles on this for government as well. Those are the kind of rough perspectives. I apologise for the audio problem earlier on. We'll just hand it over to discussion.
Yeah, well, great. Thanks for that introduction, Steve. Now, we've had a great number of questions from our audience, so we'll try to get through as many of them as we can right now. Now, Steve from the audience would like to know, what is the estimated minimum network bandwidth for successful utilization of cloud computing? Would you like to answer that one, Phil?
Yeah, sure. I can. It's a tricky question where there's no kind of finite answer. I guess it depends a lot on the types of applications that you're looking to run. So, as with any kind of network sizing exercise, it depends on both the volume of applications. So if you're intent on consuming 4 or 5, for example, software as a service offerings from different vendors to make part of your business application suite, then you'll need to keep in mind that all of those services are being delivered across that single connection. So, I guess most prudently think about how you can make that connection secure and safe. So that would involve potentially making sure that there's a backup service or a dual internet connection. If your business is going to be heavily reliant on the service itself. In terms of size, bandwidth and how to size, really, I think that's one of the areas that vendors certainly should be helping customers with. So something we've done, on a number of our online services is to try and help customers understand, what kind of size of connection you need based on a certain number of users to make sure that you're provisioning the right level of network access. So I guess from our perspective, there's no black and white answer, but there are some good tools, I think, from the better software as a service providers to help customers really understand that. And I think that should be part of the buying decision process that customers are looking at, which is making sure that they're working with a partner that can help, really help answer those questions, really clearly based on the exact requirements of the business.
Okay, well, just on that bandwidth question, Nigel has posed one for us. How viable is cloud computing pre-NBN, given many broadband users still experience degraded service? And also, how is security addressed? So that's 2 questions there.
I can make a quick comment on the bandwidth. Clearly,
Certainly. Yep.
Clearly, cloud computing,
Yeah, you're breaking up again there, Steve.
Clearly, with cloud computing, the network is absolutely critical. There's no way you can have cloud computing without adequate bandwidth. So it's going to be the kind of thing that is explored by organisations that have good access to bandwidth. And if they don't have good access to bandwidth, they're going to be putting it off until they do. But when you think about it, as the network technologies evolve, what we're seeing is with MPLS technologies, or the ability to run quality of service over networks, then different types of workloads can have different priority. And it's possible to think about the idea of how bandwidth can be sized appropriate to a particular computing demand, rather than buying a big fixed pipe connection. So there's a lot of new technologies coming into the telecom space that also are useful.
And Nigel also wanted to know about the security and how is that addressed. So,
well, just a brief comment on security. So the cloud is not a priori any less secure than any other way of doing IT. Applications like Salesforce.com, from an application point of view, you have to ask yourself, how can a company that supports more than 80,000 different organisations across the world with some of their most mission-critical information, customer and deal financial transactions, and have no security violations of any note over 13 years of operation? It's not an insecure platform.
right, okay. Now Mike would like to know, do you back up the cloud on your server, or your server rather?
I can take that one, Paul, if you like. So
Yeah, sure.
Give you a Microsoft perspective, if you think about some of the services that we run, absolutely, and that's a large amount of some of the value that the cloud model can provide to, we talked a bit about small business earlier, to small businesses specifically, given, again, backup, and not just backup in the very basic sense of a small USB drive sitting on top of a server in the back of a room, but a genuine backup strategy of off-siting and removing the backup from the physical location of the server, for example, is something that, again, small business, and even medium businesses, are looking at and saying, well, that's something we can effectively outsource to the cloud. So the way that we implement backup across all of the data centers that we operate, and to give you an idea of that scale, Steve talked a little bit about Salesforce.com. Microsoft, to give you a kind of a real-world perspective, we run infrastructure that's over the last 3 to 5 years cost us about $2.5 billion of investment. So you're talking about significant and massively scalable data centers right the way around the world as part of consuming services from those sorts of facilities from Microsoft or other vendors. You know, one of the expectations you should absolutely have is that those vendors are putting in place strategies for disaster recovery and backup and security of your data. All of those things should be inherent in a cloud offering. Unfortunately, probably aren't across the whole industry. But that's principally one of the things that you get from having this kind of shared scale of you know, of a number of big public cloud providers. So absolutely something we do. Certainly something that a number of our competitors would do as a matter of course, and probably a really good example of an area where, you know, businesses can take advantage of a highly sophisticated technology and process being delivered as a cloud service from a number of different vendors.
Oh, thanks for that. David and Michael both asked this question on portability. Are there clear rules around data ownership when using cloud computing? And also, what is the ease of obtaining or transferring data if changing cloud computing provider? Steve, you might like to answer this one.
Well, this is still something that's very much in a self-help vibe kind of a mode, that you need to look into this and assure yourself of how it would work before you go into a cloud arrangement. I use the phrase that rather than contracts and service level agreements, cloud computing should be about prenuptial agreements and tested plan B.
You're breaking up pretty badly there.
This is hopeless. I'm sorry about this.
Yeah,
when you go into a cloud arrangement, it should be all on the basis of being able to get out, and that means being able to get your data back and being able to run that data up into another cloud service. That kind of logic needs to be at the heart of it, and then companies can assure themselves that they can rely on the cloud. If it doesn't work, they can move to another source of service.
Okay, thanks for that. We've got plenty of questions here. Colin is asking, could you also comment on total outsource? That's, for example, Microsoft Office, some accounting functions, so that all we do is log in via web anywhere in the world. Phil, you might.
Yep, yeah, sure, I can
Listen.
talk to that. Probably a timely question from Colin, given we announced a couple of weeks ago our new Office 365 service, which effectively takes not only Office but a lot of the back-end functions of things like Exchange and SharePoint and moves them to a completely cloud-based service. So certainly, if you think of Office, I mean, it's ubiquitous in pretty much every business as a productivity application, and you know, how that's moving to the cloud as an application, I think is a good example of this kind of not necessarily an all or nothing mode. So we're delivering new versions of Office that are embedded into things like Hotmail for free. We're also having a pay-per-consumption use of Office 365 completely delivered via a web browser from our cloud services. But we continue to invest in the sort of full feature versions of Office that people continue to use on their desktops. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, you know, there's a different level of usage and requirement in terms of the functions of something like Office, depending on who you are. So if you're a fairly basic Office user, you know, you want Word and Excel to predominantly just edit documents, then, you know, you doing that from a very cost-effective cloud platform like Office 365 is a fantastic way to consume that product. If you're a heavier user, you know, you need to do advanced pivot tables in Excel or heavy editing and creation of Word documents in Word, then it probably makes sense to have a more full-featured client on the desktop. The real kind of, I guess, art of delivering those sorts of products in a cloud model is to make sure that the version that's running on your desktop interacts seamlessly with the version running in the cloud. So that's one of the kind of focus areas that we've put on something like Office. Whether you're using the web version or the on PC version, you get a really seamless experience, and the two things.
Wow. We've had a lot of questions from small business owners, and Paul says, to break it down, what are the 5 most important points for small business to consider when trying cloud software before buying? Phil?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me give you a few, and then maybe hand over to Steve to finish off. So, I mean, I think Steve touched on a couple of good points earlier when he presented. Number one is that most of these services now, because of the delivery model through the cloud, are very much try before you buy. So that's something we do. I know Salesforce and other software vendors do the same thing. So, probably point number one is, you've got an easier opportunity now more than ever to really try the applications before signing up under a subscription model. So that that I think is a really great kind of point. The second is probably thinking a bit about what are your core skills and competencies. So clearly, if you're a small business, you want to have as many people focused on non-IT stuff as possible. So cloud, I think thinking about how cloud-based services can really relieve you of the day-to-day onerousness of thinking about running IT infrastructure. Certainly before Microsoft, I worked in a small business, and for us that was a constant headache. So think about how cloud can kind of help remove that from your day-to-day business focus. I think the third thing is some of the bandwidth and portability requirements. So the two questions I'd probably ask there, I think we've kind of covered. One is, what sort of network connectivity do I need to make this service work properly for me? So a couple of things to think of there. One is, I mean, the obvious one is in the office. So what sort of office bandwidth do you have out to the internet to be able to consume the service? Making sure that people that work in the small business have got access to good quality broadband at home and probably good quality broadband on their mobile device, given that a lot of these applications are now available not just on the PC, but also on on devices like iPhone and Windows Phone 7 and Google Android and so on. So thinking about the bandwidth, and then thinking about the data portability. So making sure that you ask the question, if I decide after 1 year to move away from this particular platform or service, how easy will it be for me to move to somebody else? How easy is it to get my data back and go and consume the service from somebody else? So those are a few points from me. Maybe I'll let Steve kind of add to the five.
Yeah, I think we've honed in on the relationship between the telecommunications service and the cloud computing service, which is one of the critical issues in the sense that cloud is all about the network and the ability to have good network access. The second point I'd make is it really comes down to looking for opportunities to take an off-ramp from maintaining your own in-house IT equipment and maintaining applications in-house. And clearly there's no point in replacing something that already is running well, but when businesses come to the point where they need to do a major technology upgrade or they're looking to source a new application, then it's a good opportunity to experiment with the cloud and to look at how it can provide an alternative approach, particularly when skills are a constraint. And the whole logic of maintaining an in-house IT department starts to be more and more something that businesses are questioning because of the increasing maturity of the ability to buy applications and infrastructure services from cloud providers.
Yep, thanks for that, Steve. Jeff has a question here. Which countries' laws and legal framework apply to the cloud computing? So is it the USA or Australia or Hong Kong or what?
I can talk to that just very briefly. So
yep.
The company, the cloud providers, company of residence is where the legal frameworks apply.
Sorry, Steve, we are having a little bit of trouble with your mic. Maybe back off just a little this time. Now we're having the opposite problem. Getting,
I see,
yeah,
okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
The country where the cloud provider is located controls the legislation that company operates under. Of course, Australian businesses operate under Australian legislation. One of the issues that many companies are concerned about is that their data will reside outside of Australia under legal jurisdictions that are not the same as Australian legal jurisdictions. And there's a lot of concern about things like the US Patriot Act, the ability of US security agencies to access data. A lot of this is more about perception than reality. Australian businesses have to operate under Australian legislation, and they just need to assure themselves that the vendors that they buy services from are consistent and compliant with ways that we do business in Australia.
Thank you very much. Now we have a last question here. We'll give this one to you, Phil, and I must apologise to everyone out there that didn't get their question answered. This one is from Dennis. Can you see cloud computing providing comparatively expensive software like Dreamweaver, Adobe Premiere to small companies on occasional use basis as a way of lowering access costs to this software? Phil?
So the short answer is absolutely. It's probably again one of the great kind of benefits that we'll yield over time with cloud. I mean, I talked a bit about Office, which is a very day-to-day sort of application. Some of those providers, I know certainly Adobe have trialed things like PDF creation through an on-demand system, so that there are a number of those software vendors that we work with as well, looking to develop a kind of a pay-per-use model for some of those sorts of applications where, you know, things like expensive rendering is needed, and you don't want to necessarily pay for the whole software product. So some of that is wound up in how quickly those vendors can move that software capability into a cloud platform, and that's, you know, we're working with a number of those sorts of vendors on our Windows Azure platform as a way of doing that, for example. So absolutely, I think that will come. It makes huge sense both for the business using the software, but also for the software vendor. I mean, if you think about how much additional market that opportunity opens up for the software vendor to be able to provide software in that way, it's kind of a no-brainer, and I'm sure it's something we're going to see. As an interesting anecdote, if you want to think about it at massive scale, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Pixar as a massive movie studio in the US. We enjoy their movies. You know, that's a huge example of massive scale rendering to produce those movies that's needed. And we've worked, Microsoft have worked with Pixar to develop, you know, a cloud-based rendering engine for those guys. So, you know, at the ultimate end of the extreme, probably that example, but probably a good one in terms of an example of exactly where the industry will go.
Oh, thanks for that, Phil. Now, could we have some closing words from both of you on this subject, and we'll pass to you first, Steve.
Look, I think this is one of the biggest transformations that we've seen in the IT industry for a long time. And the whole maturity of what we now understand as cloud computing will grow very quickly in 4 or 5 years, to the point where organisations that are coming up to a refresh of any aspect of their IT infrastructure or applications should now be seriously considering exploring cloud. You always have two distinctly different conversations when you talk about computing, depending on whether people have hands-on experience or not. People with hands-on experience of it well understand where this is going to, what it means, and what the benefits and advantages are. People that don't tend to be for kind of academic reasons why it's no good.
Yeah, sorry, Steve, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for that. And Phil, your parting words.
Well, firstly, thanks to everyone for taking the time to listen. I hope it's been a useful session. I think the kind of parting thought I would leave is give this stuff a try. I mean, when you really think about it, there are a lot of cloud-based services that we're using every day, whether that's things like Hotmail, search. You know, there are a number of types of services already being used by people. You know, think about how and where that can be applied across the business, and give them a try. There are plenty of these services available. And certainly from our perspective, you know, customers are having a great experience of using some of the services that we provide, and I'm sure the same is true of a number of other software vendors. Yeah, it's certainly there for the taking in terms of you know, reducing a lot of cost, I think, for businesses in Australia.
Well, thank you very much, both of you. As we wrap up today's webinar, I'd like to mention Telstra Enterprise and Government and thank them for sponsoring today's session. I'd also like to thank our panellists, Dr. Steve Hodgkinson and Phil Goldie, and make a slight apology for Steve's microphone. Sorry about that. We had a little bit of a problem coming in and out, and etc. And lastly, thanks to you for attending and your involvement in today's event, and we really do appreciate that. Please take the opportunity to provide us with direct feedback about today and send us some topics you might like to see covered in the future. You'll be sent a link to the recording tomorrow, so we hope to see you again at another of these informative and interactive sessions. So thank you and goodbye.